Okay, I think we can start now. I mean,
okay.
it's 9 o'clock. Well, for me it's 9 o'clock, not for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a little bit late there in Europe.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bettina, for visiting us in this IoT course. I'm super happy that you have agreed to give a guest lecture here.
It's a pleasure, Frederick, and thanks for inviting me. And we're watching this program with great interest. Hopefully, the students will manage to get their projects up and running and do so well. I'm here today, of course, to talk a little bit more about Pycom and the typical sort of developer journey that we've seen, as well as a few recommendations at the end on what to look out for when you're doing IoT projects.
I'm very intrigued, and I'll be keeping, I'll letting you know if there are any questions. I'll be watching the feed all the time. We have a Slack channel open and also the YouTube live. Brilliant. And we have 44 people watching live. Excellent. Now. So you get a sense everyone. Of the audience.
Yeah. Great. So welcome everyone, and thanks for dialing in. I hope I'm going to be loud and clear today. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Pycom, the typical journeys we see with developers, and a few recommendations at the end, some observations I've done through my career in tech. Pycom, as you would have probably read by now, we're in the process of building one of the world's most integrated IoT platforms. And the whole reason we're doing that is with a laser focus on developers and the technologies and solutions required to get products to market quickly. So today, as I said, I'll talk to you about Pycom, what made us set up the company, and a little bit about the journey and the portfolio. Then I'll talk to you about the development journey we're seeing with our customers. And then I'll give you some of my recommendations as to, how to get a successful IoT project off the ground. So who are we? Well, I'm one of the co-founders of Pycom. I set the company up with Fred DeHaro, our CEO, in 2015. We had a few other founders then who've since left the company, but we set the company up because we were convinced that we could do a much better job for developers in getting technology to market. We've since grown the company from a startup to now a scale-up. We've taken some seed investment, and we've grown the company now to 25 people, 80% of whom are developers. So we know developers very well. We've got teams in the UK, teams in Eindhoven, and a team in Bucharest in Romania. And our teams are focused basically on bringing our portfolio to market. And that portfolio I'll talk to you a little bit about later on in the deck. It's full stack. It comprises everything you need for getting your IoT project to market. We've got some patents pending and more coming. So we're busy. So who do we serve? Well, when we set Pycom up, we could see that projects took ages to get to market. And so, as I said earlier on, we have a laser focus on serving developers, and you guys are part of that group, inventors in universities, in other education establishments, but also in small and medium-sized businesses and all the way through to very large corporates. We know you all have the same needs. You have pains in getting technology to market, and some of those pains are well recognized within Pycom, and we're trying to remove the barriers to getting a successful IoT to market. So how do we do that? Well, we know that the journey is typical. This is a simplified look at a journey. IoT idea. So before I started Pycom, we could see that projects would take between 24 and 36 months to get to market. And of course, that is far too long for most projects to still have inertia, energy, and also cash. So we set out to reduce that cycle to something like 3 or 4 months. We're not quite there yet, but we have had a few examples of getting from the idea to products rolling off the manufacturing line, but in most cases it takes still a little bit longer. So how are we doing it? Well, we have a full stack. We started with the hard bit. So we started with some of the hardware that you're seeing today on your desks or in your labs. So development boards, shields to put them on, right the way through to OEM modules that you can use to go to scale with. We are currently building a new range of sensors that you can attach to some of the shields. And that was partly based on a conversation with Frederick, actually saying, we want to give our students a little bit more granularity around connecting sensors. And we've had customers also who said, well, at proof of concept, I'd like to pick and mix from a suite of sensors rather than the ones you decided on in some of your shields. We've added a full cloud-based environment that also has an app that allows you to manage your device right from the way you receive it to getting it thrown into something that is a cloud platform. And our IDE, which is the programming environment, PyMaker, you can either run as a plugin to Atom or Visual Studio Code, or you can run it now also straight from the cloud in PyBytes. We've added networks, so you're familiar with LoRa and Sigfox and cellular in LPWAN, and of course also Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. By adding a LoRa server to our PyBytes cloud, we've also added mesh networks, and we're now adding cellular airtime. You can grab your data from our cloud. You don't have to, by the way. We don't lock people into the cloud, but we do have APIs for you to grab it into other platforms if that helps. And of course, we deliver services. So a lot of customers come to us and say, look, I can do half of the job, but I can't do everything. Can you help me with some additional services? One of the things that's really key and what wasn't in existence before we set Pycom up was this suite of hardware that you've seen in front of you also, which is a same footprint, so you can swap and mix and match the development boards depending on what networks you want. Multi-network. At the time where we set Pycom up, everybody told us, why are you building cost into a product by putting multiple radio chips in there? But actually, it turns out now that the industry is actually going that way, and that everybody's putting more than one network into IoT products to create that redundancy. And of course, it's MicroPython programmable, so it's much easier and quicker to get to write your application and get a product up and running than if you were writing it in C. And it's also easier to manage the updates to the program later on. So full stack, and it's a, what should I say, a vanilla flavored stack that can be used across any vertical market. So, you know, I've put some markets in here: industrial, agriculture, utilities, building management or facilities management, smart cities. And on the next slide, I'll show you a little bit about the development journey. But before I do that, Frederick, I don't know if there's any questions about Pycom and where we are today. If not, I'll just keep going.
Yeah, I haven't gotten any questions so far. They're probably very engaged in your presentation. But we have 61 live, 62 actually now. It's okay. Oh, you're going in the right direction. So
brilliant. Brilliant. All right, I'll keep going. So typical development journeys that we're seeing. So it all starts with the customer, of course. And when I know your students, and you may be doing this for proof of concept or to learn how to set products up, but the typical journey for many of our customers, they come to us because they have an area of expertise in a vertical market. So let's say it's someone who's used to driving technology into agriculture. And they'll say, okay, I can create a dashboard for a livestock monitoring, so monitoring cows in the field, where they are, how they're feeling, temperature maybe, and other biometric data from a cow. And setting up a dashboard to deliver that data to a farmer or a customer is less complex. So what happens is often our customers will come to us and say, I've got this idea, I can deliver a service to my customers by giving them this dashboard that needs data from the cows. So what they do is they go straight to the bottom of the stack, and you see the stack there on the left-hand side. They go and think about, what hardware do I need to put into this solution? As in, what do I need to attach to the cow to collect the data? And then they start thinking about firmware writing, managing their networks, what networks need to be available. So, of course, location of the deployment is important. Is it a city? Is it an agricultural field? You need to be able to manage the devices that are attached to the cows remotely, so you don't have to go and find maybe 1,000 cows in the middle of Australia. And then you have to have a platform that collects and sorts the data, that delivers it then to the dashboard. And that's kind of a basic outline of a stack, an IoT stack that a customer needs to consider. So what have been the pains that developers have gone through, and the reason for which we set Pycom up, and the things we're trying to remove? Well, if you're a small and medium-sized customer, which many of our customers are, the access to components and part and support from larger manufacturers is just not there. It's difficult. If you come to a large manufacturer of components and tell them, look, I just need 10 chips to get my proof of concept done. And by the way, whilst you're supplying those, could you help me also understand a little bit of the technical ins and outs of your chips? You will get no support. It's just too difficult for very large organizations to manage. Network redundancy was missing. So as I said earlier, not many solutions, if any, had multiple LPWAN networks available right from the proof of concept stage. And that meant that, in 4 years ago when we started Pycom, people would have cellular technology. They might have had Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on their products, but there certainly wasn't much LoRa or Sigfox or other types of network available. And of course, we now have the emergence of satellites. So it'll be interesting to see how that fits into IoT. And in my mind, it's a question of how quickly they can make the chipset smaller and the radio area smaller. Proof of concept solutions that weren't fit for scale. So a lot of customers would start with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, and they're brilliant platforms for getting up and running quickly. They're well known for many developers, and at the time, they just weren't ready for edge of network deployments. They've since changed, so maybe I should update my deck a little bit. Because I know Arduino has launched a new platform, and Raspberry Pi, of course, are moving as well. So, but at the time, we would have proof of concept solutions that were done on those platforms. And then by the time customers had tested for 6 months or even 12 months with those, they had to return to the drawing board to do the real thing. And that, of course, made the program 6 to 12 months longer than it had to be. Some platforms, some hardware vendors lock the technology into their platforms. I'm not going to name any names, but of course, it can make the solution very expensive when you scale if you have to pay 3 or 4 or 5 euros a month per device to be able to access a cloud platform. And of course, all of this contributes to long and expensive times to market and projects that run out of energy and resources and cash. And I put cash here in big, bold letters, because cash is absolutely king in all of this, regardless of whether you're in a very large organization or in an SME or as a startup entrepreneur yourself. You must consider cash as part of the equation. So the journey to market in more details. So the journeys that we see today are that they'll start with a proof of concept that looks very much like what you have in front of you, a development board, a shield, some way of connecting it to power, some antennas, maybe a case. And that can get up and running in hours, really. You don't really have to spend long now on doing that. Then you spend a few weeks, maybe a few months in discovery with customers. creating a proof of concept that customers can evaluate. And if we talk about a cow again, let's say, you can attach a neck strap to your proof of concept, attach it around the neck of the cow, and maybe you use 10 cows to start with to let your customers evaluate whether the solution is robust enough. And with that, of course, you would have developed a MicroPython application that says, well, tell me the temperature of the cow once a day, tell me where it is, and if it's lying down for too long, I need an alert, something like that. Once you've done, I would say, an alpha or beta test with a customer, you will go to a solution specification that takes into account the feedback you had from the testing you've done in the field. And then you would move to something that looks like a first prototype. And that's typically 5 to 10 units. Sometimes it's 50 if there's good confidence in the proof of concept that you've used. And for that, you would use a smaller manufacturer to give you the printed circuit board. You might use an OEM module. You can also do proof of concept again, or prototypes with, we have customers who use our development boards for a real deployment, but more often than not, they will go to the W1, GO1, LO1, and L4, or go and design their own thing. You know, we don't force people to come back and use our OEM modules. But the benefit of doing it is, of course, they don't have to rewrite their applications in any way. They can basically port what they have with their development board and the shield onto a custom-made PCB and an OEM module. Then you get your prototypes. You will review and validate that with your customers again, probably. And then you go to something that looks like the real product with mass production. And normally that's around 2,000 to 5,000 units for many customers. And after that, you can then go to scale. Once you've deployed, everything is tested, you've been through maybe a few additional design iterations, then you move to scale, and you would typically find a manufacturer that can manufacture at scale with economies of scale that comes with that. So here's an example. It's a simplified version of a product. So they started with desktop development, then they created a proof of concept. They did the integration with the OEM module. They designed their own product, and then it went in. And this one was for a factory that has monitoring equipment around Tesla car manufacturing. So they did their own app, as you can see at the top. They then got us to help them design and integrate a product for them to manage. So I'm going ahead pretty quickly here. So I don't know if there's any questions around the developer journey and the thoughts we had on that.
I haven't gotten any questions
Okay.
about that. So, but we just one thing that I thought was a bit funny. We had a guest speaker yesterday, which was about beehives and IoT. And today you're, well, introducing cows. So we have a theme of this course.
Yes, agriculture is a huge market for IoT. There's so many reasons why companies would consider using remote monitoring of livestock or crop so that farmers and staff in farms don't have to physically displace themselves. I mean, we've had customers in the US with cow herds where, you know, cows are known for being in their herd, but all of a sudden you've got 10 cows veering off to the right, and a cow can be $1,000. And of course, if you've got 10 of them veering off to the right, going into the sunset, you don't really have, this can be hundreds or thousands of acres of land where unless you attach something that locates them, you don't know where they are and you don't know whether they're well. And so, and at the same time, if you know where they are, you know they're well and they're safe, you don't have to send anyone out. No one needs to ride out to find them. You can just do it at your convenience. Whereas if you have nothing attached to them, you're spending, you know, resources and time and money finding them and bringing them back to the herd. Likewise with crop monitoring systems, we've had many customers looking at water and irrigation systems, acidity and other sort of live data for crops, because sometimes it can be a big question of the percentage of yield when you harvest. If you leave it a few more days, if you don't leave it a few more days, and the farmer doesn't always have access to driving out and checking everything. So there are real financial benefits in attaching sensors in IoT. So yeah, agriculture is a big market for us. Industrial IoT, so automation of machinery, predictive maintenance for big equipment, asset tracking, asset location, campus type applications where, for instance, in a hospital, if you are attaching sensors and geolocation solutions to, I don't know, crash carts and various other things, you always know where they are. You don't have to send staff out on a goose chase to try and find things. So, we have a number of smart city applications. We have a number of building management systems for water, utility applications like energy and room occupancy. Room occupancy has been a big thing, and I guess it'll be even bigger now with COVID as we progress and we need to keep our social distancing.
Yeah.
So on that note, the market update and the impact of COVID, there's a little bit of discrepancy between the analyst organizations, and I guess you can find answers for anything you would like to substantiate. ABI Research said that unit shipments this year for IoT devices will be down about 18%, but that's countered by IoT Analytics were telling us that IoT installations to support everything like remote assets and monitoring solutions will become more important. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of the year. I firmly believe that most analyst predictions for IoT, or a lot of analyst predictions for IoT, are very optimistic. And that's because we are all in the IoT industry, and any industry really. Everybody is very optimistic about how quickly we can roll out, how quickly we can get stuff done. And therefore, of course, we feed that information into the analyst community who, whilst they take some of it with a pinch of salt, still go by what we tell them as industry. Should I say leaders or people with knowledge? There's also reports about supply chain, and if you are following the news of COVID impact in technology, you would have realized that component sourcing has become increasingly difficult. Of course, a lot of factories were closed in China in Q1, and of course Taiwan and other areas of Asia where they manufacture high-tech components have been closed at various stages. And that has had a huge impact on supply chain. So items that were normally 30 to 40 days lead time have turned out to be 96 days. And of course, if you're planning a product, that lead time needs to be brought down. So you have options. You can plan and buy more quantity and store it somehow. You can spot buy, so you can buy on the spot market, which is typically more expensive, or you can wait if you have time.
One question here, Bettina, is that well, when you're anyway talking about COVID, I need to just how have you been affected? I mean, the supply chain, I mean, obviously has been affected, but how has the Pycom and the IoT market and the demand been affected by the COVID situation?
We've not seen too much effect, to be very fair. I think most of our customers and most of our market consists of developers who have just worked from home. So they haven't really stopped their projects unless they've been ill or have had to, take care of family members or, children in school or what have you. We haven't really seen a big impact. We've had one or two customers who've come back and said, look, we're going to be a little bit more cautious on our forecast, but most of our customers have actually continued their journey of development and getting to market. So we haven't really seen a big impact. Now, I don't know whether there's going to be a ripple effect because, of course, the majority of the world has been impacted in Q1 and Q2. There is, you know, a global impact to economy, and that may make people change their decisions. But at the same time, you know, IoT is about a zero-sum business case. It's about putting technology in place that saves money ultimately. And so it's I do believe that that putting remote assets in place will help businesses and people ultimately not having to drive out to check something.
Yeah, there is a lot of questions coming in here, but I'll actually I'll keep one of them. A couple of the questions just a bit later on into the discussion. Sure. But there came up one question about the COVID situation now.
Yeah.
But are you do you have any worries regarding increased trade protections, and what's the emergency plans if you can't produce in China anymore?
Well, I mean, personally, no. I think the world will figure this one out. And I know that, of course, between China and the US, you might find import duties. And of course, with the UK coming out of Europe and with Brexit, we will need to relook at trade deals. But ultimately, if there's too many restrictions or too heavy a levy on anything that comes in and out of the UK, for instance, we will kill our businesses in the UK. So we have to, I think we have to figure it out. And I have faith that this will be figured out. We do have offices in the Netherlands and in Bucharest. And of course, the Netherlands is still part of the EU. We could still decide to flip our HQ to the Netherlands and therefore still be part of the EU. At the moment, there's no need to do that, but it is something we've considered whether that's worth doing. At the moment, our logistics operations are in the UK. And for the simple reason that we and our customers benefit from better shipping terms in terms of in and out of both Europe and the rest of the world. We ship mainly with DHL, and the prices that we get here are very favorable. And of course, that benefits our customers. And also the local post system here in the UK is fairly effective. So we're not that affected by trade deals. One of the things that is a key action that we've taken as a result of COVID is we have looked at all of our bill of materials, and we are in the process of making sure that we have second sources in place. I was going to talk about that a little bit later on, but second sourcing for components is very important. So, you know, a recommendation here is to build bills of materials for products where there's good supply from multiple vendors.
There was a follow-up question about Russia, if you export to Russia, but that might be a yes or no question.
Yes, we do export to Russia, but there are some restrictions in shipping in and out of Russia, in the sense that to ship to a customer in Russia, they have to be a business. You're not allowed to ship to an individual or a person. It has to be a business that we ship to. The products come back. Basically, we've tried it before. Because customers have insisted, and the products basically are shipped back to us. So as long as it's a business, we can ship to Russia, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. I think I have a bunch of questions, but I'll just let you continue on your presentation a little bit more, and I'll bunch them up, and we'll have because I don't want to interfere too much with your presentation.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. So one of the other things around supply chains and impact is, of course, and maybe that shouldn't sit under supply chain as much, but more under the COVID impact, is that a lot of customers are conserving their cash, and they're looking at operational expenditure instead of capital expenditure. And that means that if you're developing IoT, and we see a lot of business models like this, where you've developed an IoT solution with a full stack, maybe hardware as a service or a rental model or a recurring revenue model around the solution is maybe attractive to the customers that you're dealing with. So it's definitely something to be considering. We've seen a lot of uses for drones. We have a number of drone companies, one in agriculture, funnily enough, a very early customer, flying out using LoRaWAN to connect to sensors that were attached to livestock. But we're also seeing defense applications now with drones and many other areas. And of course, retrofit solutions, so smart meters, anything where you have an installation that's already in place, typically around utilities or machinery or a campus type where it's easy to install an IoT or a connectivity retrofit solution. Is interesting as an outcome of the COVID-19 impact. So just a little bit about the size of the market. You know, we've seen for many years now 50 billion connected devices by 2020. Then that was taken down to something like 30. And, you know, the saga goes on. How big is the market? How many connections? How many products are going to be out there? And one of the things you'll also find is if you're talking to VCs or raising cash, everybody likes the area to the left, to the right, sorry, the applications area, which is the cloud area where you typically find recurring revenue, software as a service models that underpin a really solid business case. They're less keen as you move towards the left side of the slide towards hardware. But you cannot establish IoT applications. You cannot provide IoT solutions without hardware. It is a necessary part of delivering a full IoT ecosystem. And that's part of the reason. It's difficult, it's expensive, it's kind of lumpy as business and its management of physical products. It's certainly not easy. We've felt this, we've done it, but it's necessary. And it's actually going to account for 26, maybe even 30% of the revenue opportunity in IoT. So even though it might make the journey to successful provision of an IoT solution more difficult, we definitely feel that it's worth continuing our journey in hardware, but adding the rest of the stack. And here you could say the stack is lying down in a way, because it's hardware and the networking and then the cloud and applicationware on the right hand side. So the IoT ecosystem, well, I mean, we all claim to have an IoT platform. There's about 620 IoT platforms in the world and counting, and it's difficult to decipher what's a platform, what's a single solution, you know, how does it all stack together? There are alliances and partnerships happening. You know, some of the very popular IoT platforms that I would call a cloud platform is AWS, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, and Google, and we work with all of them. But there's also SAP HANA, IBM, Bosch have got their own platform. You know, that they are endless, and some of them are skewed towards a particular purpose. I've spoken to a number of VCs in the last few years, and of course the new frontier of investment is a full vertical stack. So talk about agriculture, a solution to monitor cows, or a solution to monitor machinery in a factory, insurance, telematics, but something that gives you the full stack, all the elements. A customer can go and take the whole solution and they are up and running. That gets investment from VCs, and if you go and look at some of the deep tech investors in the VC world, they do invest in full vertical stacks. So that's worth considering. If you are building a product, try and see if you can go that step further and develop the whole stack. You'll definitely be able to attract good funding with that. So I've got some recommendations. Before I go to those, I don't know, Frederick, if there's any other questions I need to sort of scoot in over.
Yeah, there are too many.
Okay.
Should we perhaps we should just try to get rid of the questions right away,
sure.
and then we'll continue on. And let's see if you might, some of these questions you might just say that, okay, I'm going to talk about in just a couple of slides. And that might be a good way to do it.
Yeah.
So let's start from the chronological order here.
Yeah.
And one interesting question about computational entropy, and so is generating computational entropy an issue for IoT devices?
Computational entropy. I'm not sure I even understand the term. I do apologize.
Well,
I have a very old engineering degree from about 20 years ago. So
I think we're talking about entropy in the informatics perspective here. But let's say that we'll just skip that question just for
yes, if you can give me an opportunity to answer that. I'm happy to look into it, but it's certainly not something I've come across as an issue.
Yeah, and there is one question about security from Sophia, and she asked, "What's your opinion about security, and how secure are your products from hacking?" So
that's a really good question. So security for us, of course, there is security. There's enterprise level security in our products. You can encrypt the data and what have you. What you can't do is secure your device against someone with a screwdriver who goes out and tampers with it. And of course, hacking happens on IoT devices as well. The way to secure IoT is to do it across the full stack, because if you only secure the device, or you only secure the network, or you only secure the cloud, or you only secure the dashboard, then you have these weak points in between the elements of the stack. So to create good, robust security solutions, of course, you need to look across the whole solution. You need to assess the risk. So if I am providing IoT for a hospital, so connected devices that have some element of critical care in there, of course, security is super critical, and uptime, and the SLAs, so the service level agreements you'd put in place, are much, much more stringent than if I'm, let's say, monitoring whether the lights are switched on or not in a Coca-Cola vending machine. And of course, in that context, is the Coca-Cola vending machine connected by Ethernet to the rest of the office WLAN? If that's the case, then yes, the machine needs to be isolated. And so what I'm trying to say here is it's about considering the individual use cases and making sure that the security solutions are wrapped around the whole stack, not just the elements.
Yeah. And it's yeah, I mean, you could probably speak for hours on that topic. I assume. Well, let's skip to the next question. And there is a newly launched ESP Rainmaker IoT platform. And I've got a question about that. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, Espressive are an investor in Pycom, and they've been a very early partner of ours, and have done incredibly well. Theo Swian, who is the CEO of Espressive, is a god in IoT at the moment, and is extremely competent in terms of predicting what the market needs. And the ESP32 was our chipset of choice from the beginning, and we'll definitely continue working with Espressive. Espressive are also building an ecosystem around their products. I haven't tried the Rainmaker. It was launched maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, maybe a bit longer. I became aware of it a few months ago, I think. And so by all means, try it out. It's probably very good. Everything that comes out of Espressive, it seems to be working really well. And we wish them every success with the Rainmaker.
Yeah, and I haven't tried it either. So, but it looks nice, and obviously I need to try it out as well.
Yeah.
yeah, we have more questions here that if a client wants to manufacture their own product,
yeah,
after they have done their proof of concept,
yeah,
are you involved in that process, or is it? I think you mentioned this before. Or...
yeah. That's completely up to the client or the
Yeah.
customer. So we can be as involved or as hands-off as they want. They don't even need to tell us what they're doing. We have so many customers, we don't see them until they come and say, well, I now want 5,000 LO1 chipsets, or can I buy, what's the price for volume of products? Absolutely. And we support their introduction to the factory and anything they need, really. We don't force ourselves on any customer. We're very low touch, and we prefer to be low touch. Where we have stepped in to help is just in the initial stages of integrating the OEM modules. There are some things to observe. It's all written in our documentation. So by all means, if a customer has the skills and competencies and the partnerships in manufacturing, absolutely, go for it.
And there is also some follow-up questions on the same topic, but
Okay.
if are the Pycom devices itself, like if you have a low Pi device,
Yeah.
can you just buy more of them, scale them up, and use them for an industry grade application?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, they're all CE, FCC, IC, and RCM certified. So you can use them for industrial grade applications. And as I said, we have got customers rolling out solutions, tank monitoring solutions, and various others with the development boards. You can do that, of course. There are economies of scale to be achieved when you move to the OEM range. It's about half price of a development module, but it does require the development of a PCB that supports it, and depending on the sensors someone wants there. But we don't, yes, absolutely, you can use it. We have IP67 cases for dust and ingress and water protection that can be used, or customers can create their own cases for whatever they're doing. Sometimes it makes sense to start, if you're starting out and you're new to IoT, or you're setting up a new business, or you don't quite yet know how customers are going to use the products. It does make sense to run some pilots or some early stage products that just build on the development boards, and then plan to migrate to one of the OEM range products later on. But yes. And we do have volume. We have volume discounts, of course, on the development boards as well. So if you are going to volume, call us or drop us an email, and we can help.
Yeah, and it came a pretty big question here. The story of Pycom.
Yes.
How was it founded? Perhaps you can keep it short, but like,
yeah, definitely.
What's like the idea behind it, and what's the biggest challenge when you? Oh.
Yeah, so we, in 2015, both Fred and I had worked for an MVNO, which is a mobile virtual network operator, for a few years, and we could see all the problems that happened at hardware level. So when customers were trying to go from, we had some vending machine examples where customers were trying to get them connected. These vending machines were placed in petrol stations where the customer who owned the vending machine didn't own access to the Wi-Fi network. And so connecting a vending machine via Wi-Fi or even other networks that were local was impossible. It just meant that they could never get in touch with the device. So they decided to implement a cellular solution, and that worked really well, but it took ages because they had to start from scratch. And, a project that we could deliver now within 3 to 6 months took something like 24 or 36 months. We also had some robotic lawnmowers where the manufacturer was hoping to get the product to market within 6 to 12 months. And it took 36 months to get the product to market because the hardware piece was so complex. So, and at the time as well, we had the emergence of LoRa and LoRaWAN, and of course Sigfox became more rolled out as a network, and we had the idea that we could do with more networks than just cellular. So we presented it to the people around us, and it was decided that wasn't a good idea. So we thought, well, we think it's a good idea, so we're going to go and help developers make this happen. We always knew we wanted to create a platform, and then we started with the Wi-Fi, which was just a Wi-Fi and Bluetooth product, leveraging the ESP32. We then built the LoWi, which was the first LoWi that just had LoRa, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Then came the PhiPi and the GPi, and we built accessories around the portfolio gradually. We always knew we wanted to build a full stack. Consider it the Apple of IoT. My slide deck, the strategy in, was it September 20? Oh, I can't remember when it was, but my slide deck very much brought out a philosophy around making IoT as easy as when you pick up an Apple iPhone and you have to configure it for the first time, you're taken through a wizard, and within 5 minutes, you're up and running on the network, you're logged into your various apps, you can load more apps to it, and you're up and running, basically. We want to make IoT as easy as that, and we've got lots of stuff in the pipeline and in the portfolio that we're going to deliver on, and part of it is the sensor range that's coming out. We're working on machine learning libraries that eventually will translate into AI. And we have ideas around how to create the app store for IoT, similar to Apple, where instead of having to write your own apps, you can either write apps for the greater good of the community, and of course, we're not asking people to do this for free, or you can grab apps that others have developed. So similar to the App Store, same principle. But yeah, I mean, we set up in 2016. We really started in earnest, and it's been a long and very busy journey. We started 3 of us, and we are now 24 people. We've bootstrapped the business by and large. We have had some investments from angels and a few partners. It's been a roller coaster, a great experience. We've met so many people. Last year, Frederick was part of some of the events we hosted around the world, every continent in the world, and we've got so much more to do. When our journey doesn't finish here, but yeah, I could go on forever, so apologies.
But and also, I mean, your story is also part of the reason why we use your product in this course. We don't really want to, as a university, we want to be open to use whatever product, but I mean, we needed to start something that was like pretty easy to get students going, and that's the idea behind it. So. Yeah, but I think that there are some questions dropping in. But if you just continue on your presentation, I'll just save these questions until later on. So
okay, brilliant. I'll keep going then. I've got some recommendations for you all. They're not exhaustive, but some of the things I wanted to highlight when you're thinking about your projects, and in particular, this concerns the full stack, as well as when you're doing hardware projects, which I know you're doing at the moment. So know the detailed requirement, the expertise that you require. There's a question around build or outsource, how to choose your vendors, and cash is king. So size matters, right? So when we're talking about IoT products that sit at the edge of the network, some of the requirements you want to look at is, where does this product need to fit in? Don't create a PCB that is 20 by 20 centimeters if it has to fit in a small enclosure. Does it have to sit at the edge of the network for 10 years on a very small battery? Then you need to consider how much current drain you've got in the product and how to alleviate that by putting deep sleep measures in, and maybe restricting how much data you're sending. I don't need to know, again, the cow example. If I'm a farmer, I don't need to know where the cow is every hour or whether it's well every hour. I just need to know once a day maybe where it is, and that it has a pulse, and or if this then that scenarios occur. So if it lies down for more than 3 hours and it's still, then of course I want an alert to say, go and check on that cow. Sensor types and accuracy is all about, you know, we can all go and pick really nice, expensive sensors for our products, but is that necessary? And sometimes, yes, it is. I mean, if you're doing particle sensing for a city application that monitors pollution, you need to make sure it's the right pollution sensing and that you have the appropriate particle sensing in your monitor. The other thing is, can you scale it? So you may have the best IoT idea in the world, and you may be a victim of your own success, that you get hundreds of thousands of customers saying, I want your product. How are you going to scale it without going back to the drawing board, or without stopping yourself, or creating barriers for yourself? Dual sourcing is one of those things we talked about, reducing the lead time risks and actually last time buy and end of life risk whilst you're doing your hardware development. Deployment location is all about, is it indoor, outdoor? Does it need to be submerged in water? Is it going to be attached to a dog collar, and therefore does it end up in a lake when the dog goes swimming? And affordability. Now that is very important, because we all have the best intentions on the bill of material cost when we set out and we have a good idea around a product. Just know, if you haven't, or if you don't know already, every time you add a penny to your bill of material, you can triple or quadruple that by the time it hits the shelf. Consider whether you're going to sell directly or through a distribution network who also need margin. Think about value-added tax and import and export duties, and make sure you really understand what is your customer willing to pay for this product by the time you've finished designing it. The expertise you need to build a full hardware product is not just you know, laying out a design on a hardware board and adding some chipsets to it. You actually need to know the whole solutions architecture to create an optimal solution. And again, that goes back to understanding the whole stack. What is it? All the questions I asked earlier. How does the product interact and fit with the rest of what's going on in that stack? Which networks are appropriate? I mean, I keep going back to agriculture. I do apologize for this, but if you're going into farming and agriculture, there's probably very little reason, maybe not in Sweden, I don't know, but in the rest of the world, don't necessarily, you should look at whether cellular is an appropriate solution. I mean, LoRa might be a better solution, a mesh network around your farm or the campus type you're trying to use. You know, if you're in a city, it could be that cellular is the best solution. LoRaWAN has some, or LoRa and LoRaWAN has some limitations. And in particular in Europe, you have to observe the 1% duty cycle, which means you can't send or receive more than 1% of the time. In the US and elsewhere, it's less stringent. In cities, you may want to consider cellular or Sigfox, and you may also consider multi-network. So, you know, sometimes the application runs on one network, other times it runs on another. And of course, firmware writing. So you need to have at least these 4 skills to put a good solution in place. And then, of course, you've got the cloud and the networking and securing the whole stack and all these other services. But as a basis for just pure hardware solutions, you need to look at this. And so build versus outsource. I mean, we do have customers occasionally coming to us and saying, look, I've done a proof of concept with your technology. It's great, but I'm going to build my own product because it's I need ownership of the technology I put in there. I want to put some IP in there. I get more granularity on everything I build myself. I perhaps have more flexibility, and maybe it's perceived as lower cost and higher margin for me, and which is true in many ways. But you do need to consider the downsides of that, which is skills and resources to find and hire. And one of the things we've found is that often customers, you know, they do their proof of concept. We have a conversation about maybe helping them get a printed circuit board and a product done. And they think they can do it cheaper. themselves, because of course we need to pay our staff, so we add a little bit of margin to things, and so they go away and they come back within 2 to 3 months, because they actually find that hiring the skills and working directly with manufacturers is all complex and can cost up to 3 times as much as if they pick an OEM module off our shelves. I know I'm plugging Pycom at the moment. This is the whole reason we set the company up, was to make things cheaper, faster, better. But by all means, if a customer is wanting to go and do their own thing, absolutely, we support that. It's not a problem. Outsourcing lets you focus on what you're good at. So if you want to outsource part of the stack, it could be the middleware, it could be the dashboard, it could also be the hardware or some of the firmware development or code checking or testing, whatever it might be. It lets you focus on what you're good at. It's quicker to implement. It sometimes extends your network because, of course, you're working with partners in the industry who will talk about you and your solution, particularly if it's brilliant. Some of the drawbacks are a lot of partners will want and suppliers will want cash up front. It is a little bit more expensive. You may erode a little bit of your margin if you take a solution into bolt on. And of course, you may be tied into a third-party roadmap. So someone else's roadmap that you may or may not have influence on helping to drive. Choosing your partners, of course, COVID has had the impact we spoke about earlier on IoT and the supply chains, and therefore it's important to choose a partner and manufacturing partner that has your that you communicate well with, that understands your urgencies and your best practices and all of that. China is a very good place to find manufacturing partnerships, but there's also some pitfalls, and you can learn the hard way, as in you form some partnerships, you order products and then they come back in shoddy quality. But there are also some extremely competent manufacturers. There's also manufacturers elsewhere in the world. We have manufacturers in the UK, we've got them in Europe. So it's just a question of finding who's right for you. Big partners are not always better. Big partners means if you're a startup or a smaller team, you may end up getting pushed out because of priorities. If you don't meet your manufacturing slot, for instance, it could mean that you need to wait another 1 or 2 months to get your stuff done. But big partners, of course, have capacity, and provided they support you, they can be very good partners. One of the things that's helpful with choosing your suppliers and your partners is if you can help them contribute to their goals. So one of the examples is one of our high volume manufacturers, they wanted to be in IoT and they chose us more than we chose them, to be fair. I mean, we wouldn't have had any chance of working with them unless they chose us. And so we've been fortunate that we've been incubated, by a lot of organizations, including Espressive and various others of our partners. Goodwill, good connections with the leadership teams or the people in charge of particularly the area that you're partnering for is important. And don't be afraid to ask for help. We've had to do that. There's no shame in asking for help. The worst case is they say, no, we can't help you. But, engage with them, give them forecasts and your outline, and you'll share your vision with them so that they know where you're going with it all. And cash is king. I mean, this is the eternal business mantra. Your customers, just like ours in many cases, will take twice as long to pay you for stuff. They'll roll out probably half as much as what they forecast, and they'll negotiate at the 11th hour when you need their cash to pay your suppliers or your staff or whatever. They'll negotiate to get better terms for themselves. So make sure you have enough cash to sustain your business or your project whilst you wait. It puts you in a better position. And that's it. We have a quote here from Steve Jobs. People who are really serious about the software should make their own hardware. That's us in a nutshell. So yeah, that's it from me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
to be able to present
thank you.
You all.
Thank you very much. And then, there are one question here, which is very spot on. So when is the Pygate going to be released?
It's shipping this week.
Yeah,
it's shipping this week. So I'm happy to say it's finally coming to market. It's been, of course, COVID had an impact on the Pygate, because all of a sudden the regular lead times that we were expecting were blown completely out of the water, and we had to really work hard. We've incurred a lot of spot buy costs to get there, even for now, but it's rolling out this week. So we're very, very happy with that. I think our team in the UK have handled something like 134 boxes today of stuff. So it's starting to ship as of this week.
That sounds great.
Yes.
I look forward to getting my hands on one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one question about the maturity of the PyBites platform in comparison with AWS or Google or whatever platform you showed up.
Yeah, so we are nowhere near any of those platforms, and we actually don't compete in many ways. We are focused on device management primarily. So whilst it is a cloud-based platform, you can use it for data and network management and device management. Our primary focus with PyBites to start with up until very recently has been to give people a tool with which they can manage their devices. We're still working on it. We had a PyBites 2 release in the early part of this year, which amongst others have seen us add the PyMaker ID to the cloud, which means you're no longer tied into drivers and compatibility between your laptop maybe and the various drivers required. Some people still prefer to load Atom and a PyMaker plugin or Visual Studio Code. That's fine. PyBites is work in progress. We work with AWS, we work with Google, we work with Microsoft. We've hosted events. We talk to them regularly. I don't see us competing at all with them.
Yeah, and that's I think a good answer to that question. And one also very interesting question, and you mentioned the machine learning libraries. What's your timeline, and is there any way to be involved in that?
Potentially. It started in February. So we've hired a team around one of our very senior firmware developers over in Bucharest. So we've got some data scientists and others working on it. And the first demo I saw a few months back was a PyTrack wafted around on a stick to recognize patterns. And of course, machine learning is the future of putting intelligence at the edge of the network, right? Because if you can say, okay, the vibration of a machine will tell me how tired it is, when to put new oil on it, or when to change a fuse, or, all of that is coming. Now, the sensor nodes that we're launching will be shipping late summer, I think, late summer, maybe early autumn. They're already in progress with our factory. So we've got 3 of them coming out as the first ones. They're called Pi nodes. The first versions will have cable attachments. The second versions will be Bluetooth nodes, so wireless. And the machine learning libraries will be launched in association with those, so that you can start to really create great libraries for that. And we will most likely put it out to our community to help us crowdsource machine learning libraries. I mean, there's no need for us to develop it all in-house. We would never get to the end of it. If our community wants to participate and make it better, stronger, more polished for other developers, we're more than happy to see people get involved in that. Definitely. I will be communicating more about that over the summer and early autumn.
Yeah, I really look forward to that. And well, you might be aware of the speech of the TTN conference of Edge Impulse by John.
We know Zach. Yeah,
and that's a really interesting. That's a really interesting service actually they are releasing. So, have you? My first thought, okay, could I in some way integrate this into MicroPython? And it should be possible, I think. But
probably,
there is no libraries now. So
I don't actually know what their plans are, to be very honest. We know Zach. We spoke to him at the conference, and subsequently, great initiative. They had some funding in the US to go and make it happen. And so yeah, I'm sure we will find people implementing that on our products. We're focused on building our own libraries at the moment because it's specific to the sensors at the moment. But, you know, I'm not ruling anything out at this point. You know, it's about what makes, you know, stuff more useful, solutions more useful for developers. Definitely. Yeah.
And we have the TensorFlow, TinyML. That's also one thing. If that just could be integrated, I mean, there would be a great potential for. There one more question here, and how's your view on how the App Store is going to work? You talked about the App Store for modules.
So I imagine it can work. So there's several aspects of an App Store, because one is creating apps for mobile phones in an if this then that type scenario, and we've got one coming out for the PyLife range that allows you to basically configure the device in more of an app way on a phone. But then there's also apps in a MicroPython sense, where you've written an app that, you know, detects and monitors something in the field, and instead of someone else reinventing the wheel, this app is described, it's put in a library. You decide as the developer of it whether you want to charge for it or whether you want to throw it out there for free. Create a business model around it, and it'll work very much like the App Store. That's the vision around it. Of course, you can create scoring mechanisms where others are telling the rest of the world, this is buggy, it's not buggy, it works really well. And it'll most likely be in association with Pycom hardware. And yet again, you know, once that's up and running, I don't see why we wouldn't have even younger students, school children age, using our products, bolting everything together, picking the app, drag and drop type interface where they can set up a monitoring of a bird's nest, which I know my children had in the school. They had a webcam in a bird's nest so they could see what was going on. Or maybe they can monitor something else that's useful for them. And likewise, if you have I don't know, a biology student or a psychology student or something else where they're not necessarily technologists, but they want to start to do some research into, I don't know, tree growth or the way people move when they're depressed, or whatever it might be. You can imagine that they would use technology to achieve that rather than having to tabulate data and do things manually. And if you can create a whole portfolio of products that they could literally buy in a store, it arrives, they configure it via an app, they load a MicroPython app that suits their needs. They maybe do some configuration steps. You know, you've all of a sudden created an environment that's super useful for people who are not necessarily developers, but who need to use technology for various reasons.
Yeah. And there is, well, I have one question on my own. I need to cover that as well. And that's Adafruit. They are, well, successful as well in in this area, developing devices for hobby and developers.
Yeah.
And they have their own fork of MicroPython. That's why they do CircuitPython.
Yes.
And just your thoughts about that these are not fully compatible with each other.
Yeah.
And just you give your thoughts about these two.
They decided to do we worked with Adafruit. We sell our products through them. We visited PT and Lady Ada and are good friends with them if you want. And they decided to do their own fork for various reasons. Maybe because it would work better with their own portfolio. Maybe because I don't actually know. But I don't really have too many comments. I think it's just a question of two different ways. It's a bit like Amazon Web Service have done, they bought the FreeRTOS platform that we use as an operating system, and they've now created the Amazon RTOS for hardware devices. And so these things happen, unfortunately, in the industry. People decide that they can do things optimized maybe for their own environments. I guess it may not help the community as such, particularly around MicroPython, but I don't really know what to comment on it.
No, well, the thing is that they had a pretty extensive sensor library for CircuitPython, and there is, well, some hassle of porting things over.
Yes.
Just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
There is one question. I think we'll try to wrap it up after this one. But job opportunities at Pycom.
Always, yes, always. We're always recruiting. So what have we just done? We've just done a couple of. We've just done 2 recruits in the last 2 weeks. We are a bit slower than we want to be in terms of getting people interviewed, and I still have to go back to some people whom I've interviewed. And so, yes, by all means, send your CV and a cover letter to jobs@pycom.io. We tend to prefer people being at the office, so either in the UK or in the Netherlands or in Romania, just because I know COVID has kind of halted that. And we don't object to people working from home, but we feel that the interaction between the team members makes everybody more intuitive. So we don't tend to recruit so much remotely. So we're looking for people who want to travel, have an experience, have an adventure in Eindhoven or in the UK or in Romania, typically. And so the types of people we're recruiting for are technical support, it's for full stack, it's for, we will be recruiting more cellular developers, so networking is important, and a few others. Yeah, but we're always recruiting and looking out for good talent, basically.
Yeah. Okay, nice to hear. And I think that I've covered like the bulk of the questions now. Okay. It's been a lot of discussions ongoing. Sure. And you have more viewers now than when you started. So I think that's
reassuring. No one's fallen asleep or zoned out. That's fine. Look, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to respond to them through you, Frederick, or any of the other team members over in Linnaeus. So just feel free to circulate them, and I'll try and do my best to answer them in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah. I could probably just pop in one question about the job then. What's the qualifications? Do you need a university degree or? Typically,
we never rule people out, but a university degree does give you a methodical way of resolving problems. But that's not to say you can't learn that on the job. Absolutely not. So we primarily have people who are university graduates, but there are also some who don't have a degree. So there isn't really a sort of one answer to that. It just depends on the qualifications. We do test people, and I'm probably going to scare everyone off now, because 95% of applicants who go through our test don't do very well. It's quite a difficult one, and it's not that we necessarily rule people out if they don't score 100%. It's more about recognizing where are the gaps that we may need to fill in their learning or their skill sets, and we take it from there. But we're not mean to applicants, and of course it's about fit, cultural fit, as much as it's about skill sets and that drive. Startup life, scale up life is not easy. It's not for everybody. We have had people who've joined us and gone, whoa, what's the pace here? Because that's not at all what I'm used to. And so I wouldn't recommended to people who want an easy life or an easy journey. But at the same time, we do reward people. We've got decent salaries, I would say, and a good share option scheme, and a fun environment to work in. But it's fast paced. It's not necessarily the easiest of environment. and I would also say with that, we tend to recruit people who have skills already, because everybody is very, very occupied with the areas they're working on, and so there's less time to really coach and teach people the right way. We're not big enough to have very young graduates who need to learn not just we have got graduates, I'm not saying we don't, but we typically work better with people who have a few years experience, because it gives them not just the academic experience around whatever subject matter that they're working in, but it also gives them, it also means they have some level of understanding of what a business is and how what it means to work in a business. That's not a dress code kind of a question, because we wear t-shirts and jeans, all of us, but it's more about how do you set up a meeting, when do you return a call from someone, the sense of urgency around a project, what are your responsibilities, and how do you make sure you communicate with the team around you if you're late or if you're early, or all of those types of things.
Yeah. Okay, but very, very extensive answer for that question. I think that you covered like
all of it.
really interesting to hear this as an insight from you as a startup company as well. So it's really an added bonus for this guest lecture, I would say.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. As you can hear, I love answering questions. I can talk about Pycom until I'm blue in the face, which has never happened actually. But happy to answer more questions in the future if people have them. And of course, they know where to find you and therefore me. Yeah.
I think we'll keep in touch during the course here, and perhaps we'll have some contact with the developers later on as well.
Yes, I am committed to finding some time where we can put a few of our developers available to answer questions specifically around the projects that people are running. I will make sure we do that.
Yeah. Okay. So with those words, I'll end the live stream.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you
everyone.
very much.
Good luck.
Yep. Right.